Behind the fiery guitar riffs and legendary duck walk was a man who helped define rock and roll. But Chuck Berry's life ended in silence, surrounded by financial difficulties and endless controversy. How did one of music's most legendary pioneers rise from humble beginnings to the pinnacle of fame, only to leave behind an abandoned house and a fortune torn apart by lawsuits, taxes, and betrayal? Was Chuck Berry a victim of exploitation or a shrewd businessman? And when he died, what was his true legacy? This is the untold story of a legend of money, music, and the mysteries that followed him to the end of his life. Chuck Berry was born on October 18, 1926, in St. Louis, Missouri. He was the fourth of 6 children, raised in a modest middle-class home where church music and family bonding were a constant. His father was a deacon, his mother sang in the choir, and it was the evenings of family singing practice that planted the seeds of a lifelong passion. But his childhood was also surrounded by the invisible walls of racism. Growing up in a segregated neighborhood, Berry did not see another white person until he was 3, and the story of that first encounter remains a vivid memory. In that divided world, music became the only bridge. At age 6, Berry was singing in the church choir, and in high school, a talent show put him on stage, starting a journey that would change his life. At the age of 17, when most young people still dreamed of the future, Chuck Berry chose a wrong turn. With 2 friends, he drove a stolen car, roamed through dark streets, and stopped in front of a few small stores to rob. That sense of adventure only lasted a few hours, before the sound of police sirens tore through the cold night. A 10-year re-education sentence was a sharp turn that stopped his youth. But within the high walls and cold bars, Berry found another freedom than music. With a guitar borrowed from a prison guard, he fumbled with each chord, practicing until his hands were calloused. With other prisoners, he formed a band, playing music in the prison church. Each performance was like a breath, keeping him alive through the dark days. Only 3 years later, thanks to his good behavior, Berry was pardoned. After his release, he wasted no time in getting his life back on track, marrying his loyal partner, the Meta, Toddy Suggs, welcoming his first child, and taking any job to support his family, from factory worker to janitor to hairdresser. But deep down, he knew those jobs were only temporary. The music was still whispering his name, and when a second chance came, Berry was ready to grab it, not letting it slip away again. A second chance changed Chuck Berry's life. And you, have you ever started from scratch? Leave comment number 1 under the video. When his family life stabilized, Berry returned to small performances in St. Louis. At first, it was just a local stage, with modest pay, but every time he stood in front of the microphone, he found himself living his truest nature. Chicago, the city of passionate blues melodies, opened the door for Chuck Berry that he had been waiting for. Thanks to the introduction of the legendary Muddy Waters, Berry met Leonard Chess, co-founder of Chess Records. Just one audition, and the contract was signed. In the summer of 1955, Maybelline was born. The fast, sharp guitar, combined with a new rhythm, made the whole of America boil. In just a few weeks, the song climbed straight to the Billboard chart. Rock and Roll From Here had a name associated with Chuck Berry. In the following years, Roll Over Beethoven, Sweet Little 16, Johnny B. Good followed one another, not only captivating American youth but also reaching out to bands that were making waves in England, including the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. John Lennon once said, "If you call anything else rock and roll, you'll have to call it Chuck Berry." On stage, he didn't just play music, he performed. His duck walk, a hunched step across the stage, became a trademark, making the audience cheer every time he appeared. From small bars, Berry set foot on the biggest stages, even performing at the White House at the invitation of President Jimmy Carter. At that moment, Chuck Berry became a living symbol of rock and roll, and it seemed like nothing could touch him. The pinnacle of fame is the most beautiful place, but also the easiest place to fall. In late 1959, Chuck Berry was running his own club, Berry's Club Bandstand, and decided to hire a new hostess. The girl drew crowds with her smile and demeanor, but Berry didn't know, or didn't want to know, that she was only 14. When the truth came out, the press pounced, the police got involved. What had started as a business decision turned into a legal nightmare. The initial sentence was 5 years in prison. After several appeals, he only served about a year and a half. But when he emerged, Berry was more withdrawn, more bitter. Friends said the fire in his eyes had dimmed, as if he knew his fame would never return. Then in the 1970s, a seemingly harmless habit landed Berry in trouble. He demanded to be paid in cash after each performance, a way to avoid filing a tax return. That meant he was often carrying large sums of money, and sooner or later the IRS would find out. This time, the sentence was 4 months in prison and 1,000 hours of community service. In the 1980s and 1990s, Chuck Berry continued to be shrouded in scandal. In 1987, he was accused of assaulting a woman in New York, knocking out her tooth and requiring stitches. The case ended with a $250 fine after Berry pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, but the repercussions were long gone. In 1990, a group of women sued Berry, accusing him of installing hidden cameras in the bathrooms of his restaurant. The lawsuit ended in a settlement of more than $1 million. Not stopping there, later that year, police raided Berry's home, seizing drugs and sensitive documents related to minors. He avoided the most serious charges, receiving only 2 years of probation, but his musical legacy has been tainted with an additional layer of darkness. However, wherever he is, in a small bar or in front of thousands of people, when Chuck Berry steps on stage, the lights shine down, his hands touch the guitar neck, all the scandals, all the lawsuits seem to disappear. He still duck walks, still solos as if wanting to tear the air apart. Perhaps, music is the only place where Berry can return to being himself, an artist, not a defendant. After years of turmoil, legal and scandal have overshadowed Chuck Berry's image, but what he brought to music cannot be erased. On stage, every time the guitar sounds, the audience still cheers, still seeing the image of the young man who changed the heartbeat of an entire generation. On March 18, 2017, Berry took his last breath at his home, at the age of 90. The news of his death made the entire music world silent. In St. Louis, bars raised their glasses at 10 p.m., bidding farewell to the son of the city that brought music here across the ocean. Bob Dylan called him the Shakespeare of rock. Many other artists also gave him deep gratitude. Berry's assets at the time of his death were estimated at $10 to $50 million, mostly in music copyright. Songs from Maybelline to Johnny B. Good have become classics. Among them, Johnny B. Good, Flew Farther Than Earth, engraved on a gold record from Voyager 1, sent into space as a message from humanity. His final album, Chuck, released a few months after his death, featured his children Charles Jr. and Ingrid and dedicated to his wife of 68 years, the Meta, Toddy Suggs. It was an affirmation that, although people may die, music will always remain. Amid all the glory and accolades, there is one corner of St. Louis that tells a different story. At 3137 Whittier Street, a red brick house stands silent, its windows boarded up, its walls peeling, its lawn overgrown with weeds. It was Berry and his wife's home in the 1950s, where they wrote and rehearsed their first songs, laying the foundation for rock and roll. In 2008, the house was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Many hoped it would be preserved as a music museum, but the reality was different. Limited funding, complicated procedures, and time constraints stalled all projects. When Berry died, his fortune was estimated at $10 million to $50 million, much of it from music royalties. But even that couldn't save the house that witnessed his glorious beginning. Now, there is only the sound of the wind passing through the rotten planks, as if the house itself were whispering old melodies to anyone patient enough to stop and listen. Chuck Berry's life is a musical masterpiece, from the high notes of Johnny B. Good to the low notes of scandal and loneliness. But like all good music, what remains is not the flaws, but the emotions it leaves in the hearts of listeners. The house on Whittier Street may be in ruins, but Berry's music lives on in every guitar, every rock and roll tune that rings out anywhere in the world. If Chuck Berry has ever been a part of your memory, a song, a moment, a memory, share that story in the comments, so that memory will not be forgotten. Thank you for joining Final Legacy on this journey. If you love the stories behind the legend, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so we can meet again in the next story.